audio, then if you're listening via the live stream, that might take care of that problem for you in the short term anyway. And there isn't really a lot of latency on that stream. So, you'd only be probably at most 7 to 10 seconds behind what's actually happening in real time.
And Strife and everyone, I know all three of us here on stage will do our best, but you may occasionally hear reverb since we're all talking to each other, and it's going to be difficult to be really disciplined about clicking the mics off and on. So we'll do our best. We'll do our best to click off when we're not the one talking, but y'all might hear some echo back from open mics. So bear with us, please. And please, if something really seems to go wrong with the audio for a lot of people in the audience, please do put something in text and we'll pause and try to sort it out. Cornelia, welcome. Ariella, welcome and good to see you. This is the Mythos session. We'll be starting our conversation at the top of the hour. The other thing to know, if you're not already aware of it, and I am sure many of you are, is that if you're in Firestorm and you click on the headphones icon, it will bring up a list of everyone in voice with a slider. So if one speaker, welcome to voice, Pookie, if one speaker is too hot for you, is distorted or too loud, or one speaker is too quiet, you can use the sliders to boost one person without turning the sound up when you don't really need it for everyone, if you see what I mean. So if you're not familiar with it, it's the headphones icon. in the little bar underneath. Yeah, really helpful links. Svarga, welcome. 3, good to see you. Glad to have you here. Marlu, welcome. Good to see you. And the shouted comment tells us that Dave is, as promised, wrapping up the wild party happening in the mushroom circle before the top of the hour.
We had a Fairlands first here. In fact, with the first time I'm aware of, we've had a DJ spinning live while on the Cool Bus tour. So there were 60 avatars or something on that bus, and Dave was one of them, and he was live streaming to Fantasy Fair Radio right up until the moment that the bus crashed into Fungalmire.
The inevitable crash. That's
The
wonderful.
inevitable.
You know what? It didn't crash. They landed it
didn't?
very neatly, and not on top of
Right.
they landed it in the mushroom circle on the other side from where we were dancing. So no avatars were crushed.
That's excellent.
That is impressive.
They stuck the landing. There were crashes.
Yep.
There were quite a few crashes.
Well, I
before we
mean,
got
some
to
of the
Fungalmire.
avatars on the bus crashed,
Yes,
but like nobody was crushed.
love it.
Lara, welcome. Let me type.
That will make the boys in legal very happy to hear.
Welcome, Safia. Welcome, Patty. All right. It is the top of the hour, and while I am sure that welcome Kate, that a few more of the wild dancers from the Mushroom Circle will be joining us, I am going to open the 2023 Fairelands Mythos conversation. This is an event that we've been having for some years now, and I say that because I don't actually remember exactly how many. I want to say 5. This might be the 6th. I'm not sure. Somebody can look it up. But we've been doing this as a way to honor and explore and talk about the story that underlies everything we do here. And let me say a little bit more to set that up for those of you that might be new to the Mythos conversation this year. Every Fairland has its story. Every Fairlander has their story, and we bring them all together and we mix and match and party and converse and share and hug and do all the things together. And yet there is a through line. There is a thread that binds the fairs year to year together. And this thread has been woven together over the years with many other threads to become a tapestry that is not finished and will never be finished as long as the fair continues. Many of you will know about Junction, will have heard the saying that the Fairelands may fade into the mists, but Junction abides. That is a cornerstone of the mythos, but not the only piece. And that is the kind of thing we're here to talk about tonight. And I have with me on stage folks who need no introduction, but are here tonight because of their role in developing and deepening and widening the mythos. Now, I am going to begin by introducing someone who is not on stage with us tonight, but who has been here for every other Mythos session that we've done. And that is Elizabeth Tinsley, who was called away at the last minute tonight and can't be here with us, but is absolutely with us here in spirit and is absolutely part not only of the mythos over the years, but this year's mythos. So I'm going to introduce her anyway. And then I'll introduce these other two on stage with me. I, by the way, am Aoife Lorefield, and I do a variety of odd things around the Fairelands. Basically what other people tell me to do, sort of. Elizabeth Tinsley was a Fairelands merchant starting in its second year. In 2012, she stepped up to take over as the executive director's role when Fair founder Ember Farina had to step down. Since the fair is ultimately a celebration of the varied fantasy role-play communities of Second Life, Elizabeth was the one who saw that if the fair was to flourish, it needed to become a fantasy role-play experience in and of itself. So no matter what we say tonight, Elizabeth is part of it. Also with us tonight is Ashlyn Sinclair. And while this is the first time she's joining us officially for the Mythos session, as you will hear, she too is absolutely core to what we do here. And welcome to all those arriving. I am seeing all of you in here in voice, which is awesome. This is a voice event. Please turn off music, media, and your microphones. Bain Finch is live streaming this to YouTube. If you have a problem with the audio in World, please ask in text for the link and someone will pop it in there for you. Ashlyn Sinclair has been part of the fair community since the third year when the Prim Perfect program Designing Worlds did its first show on the fair regions. Ash was the director of that program, and it began a connection to the fair that has grown stronger every year. She has, for many years, been the producer, writer, and director of the Fairelands Quest, the interactive adventure experience central to the growth of the mythos of the Fairelands. She is also the Bard Queen. The Bard Queen's voice, the Bard Queen's presence. Ash is also on the steering committee of the newly formed Fairelands Media and is a producer and star of its first machinima production, Harland Quinn and the Omega Hex. Zander Greene is the founder of Fantasy Fair and co-director from its inception until the end of the fair last year, when he stepped down as co-director to take the helm at the new Fairelands Media, a group with the goal of bringing the stories of the fair to a wider audience. an audience outside the fair and outside Second Life, in the unshakable conviction that what we do here, who we are here, deserves to be known and appreciated as widely as possible. Having introduced these two very important, very creative, highly skilled members of the Fairelands community, let me say briefly what the format is of our conversation. I'm the moderator, sort of. So I have some questions in my back pocket that I will be introducing. But this truly is a conversation, and we don't even know exactly where it's going to wind up. We do welcome questions, but I would ask for two things. One is that you ask your questions in text, at least for now, that you stick to text. I will be monitoring the text and will address them as soon as we can, as it's pertinent. If there's time, we may have an open mic Q&A at the end, but that just depends on how the timing goes. So if we say something that you want to know more about, feel free to ask. The first thing I'd like to start with, since there are some new faces in the audience this year, is to hand it over to Zander first, but also Ash, to tell you a little bit about what the mythos is, what it means to have one, and a little bit about the shape of it so far. Zander?
Well, thank you very much, Aoife. And the list of what Aoife really and truly does around here is long. She's too humble a person to make that clear, but I am happy to do so on her behalf. Aoife has been an integral part of the Fair's LitFest team for many years now. She has done an incredible job with organizing and administrating the region tours that happen daily. And that's a big job, and she does it very, very well. And Aoife is also my right hand in the newly formed Fairelands Media Group. And if you haven't had a chance to, we'll get the link out here in a little bit. But go and listen to the interviews that she's done with Davisaurus, the world builder of this virtual fantasy realm that we are blessed to be in tonight, Fungalmire. She's got a two-part interview. There will be, I think, we're pretty confident now we can say there will be a third part. And it's just amazing to hear one of these world builders opening up and talking about their process. And Aoife's handling of that conversation is just about as masterful as it gets. So I want to start off by just saying thank you to Aoife, and then to say thank you to all of you. It is an enormous, I don't even have a word for it. It's an honor. It's a joy that so many people have embraced not just the fair as a shopping event, and not even just the fair as a fundraiser for Relay for Life. People have come here for the last 15 years, and in particular since 2012, when the idea of having a mythology, a lore, a body of stories that are about these worlds, when that began, and to see the way people have embraced the stories of the Fairelands and made them their own and added to them. It is one of the most profoundly humbling and uplifting experiences of my life. I mean, every writer dreams of, getting to create a grand mythos, but that's not so much what happened here. Elizabeth Tinsley and I began when she first took over the executive director role of the fair, and she said to me, the first time we ever spoke, on a region that was built by Alia Baroque called the Mists. And that was where I first met Elizabeth. Ember Farina had said to me, I've got the person, I have to step away. I can't do this anymore, but I've got the person for it. And she had told me Elizabeth Tinsley, that name. I knew the name because I knew she was a merchant here at the fair. But we'd never spoken until a few days after the fair had closed, and I was finally getting to wander around and experience the fair the way a visitor does. It's so often the case that those of us who are working on it miss a lot of the moments that are so precious here at the fair. But that was my chance to kind of walk around that year. It was 2011, a few days after the fair had closed, and I see an avatar sitting by herself on a little rock promontory on the edge of the water, looking out into the void sea. And I saw the name was Elizabeth Tinsley, and I thought, well, here's my new boss. And so what a great chance to IM and introduce myself and talk with her. That conversation was remarkable for a lot of reasons. Number one, I wasn't 30 seconds into that conversation before I knew for a fact Ember Farina had made the right choice. And one of the first things that Elizabeth said to me is, here we are. This is a fundraising event. It's a shopping event. But ultimately, she said, what this is a celebration of all these different fantasy role play communities within Second Life. And she said, I feel like we need to become a role play experience ourselves. And as soon as she said those words, it was just like the clouds parting for me. It was something that I'd wanted to do from the beginning. But, in the beginning, you're just trying to figure out how to make trains run on time and keep wheels, lubricated and rolling in the right direction. And how do you get, 150, then 200, I think, maybe that first year, merchants into what was then 9 regions. No one knew us from, Adam's house cat, as they say around here. And a lot of people stepped up and were willing to take a chance on us, but we kind of didn't know what we were doing. We had some very good help, thank goodness. And so those first few years were really just about trying to figure out a way, how do we do this large scale shopping event and do it well? And we were just kind of getting that worked out and sorted out how to do that when Elizabeth came in and took over. And when the first thing she said to me was, we need to tell a story. We need to be a story, one that has room for everyone to come in and add their own energy, their own themes and threads and characters to. And as soon as she said it, I just thought, my God, how could Ember have known how wise a choice this was? And I'll give you a little secret background information there. The way that happened was Ember was talking to Alia Baroque and explained that she was feeling really bad because she knew she had to step down as the director, but she wasn't sure who was the right person. I had said, I don't think I'm the right one for that, because I felt like it needed to be somebody who had a better understanding of the commercial community that Second Life is. I'd never run a business, didn't have a shop or anything like that. And because so much of what we were was a shopping event, I really felt like whoever led the fair needed to be someone who came from that background, had that merchant orientation. So I said I'm happy to, help however I can. The new leader is, but I don't think it's me. And so Ember was talking to Alia about that, and Alia said, I know who you need. It needs to be Elizabeth Tinsley. And so the fact that Elizabeth is and has been the director that the fair has needed for these past, 11 years now, that is directly because of Alia Baroque. So another wonderful gift that Alia Baroque has given to the fair is Elizabeth Tinsley as well. So Elizabeth and I are talking that first chat, and I said, what kind of a story do you want to tell? And she said, I don't know, but I think that we need to be having conversations about this over the course of the months between now and the coming of the next fair. And that's exactly what we did. We spoke hours and hours and hours, and a few things became clear pretty quickly. One, we were going to redesign the layout. At the first few fairs, it was a classic 3x3 grid of 9 regions, and like a tic-tac-toe board, basically. And we were learning a lot in those days about what makes for a good estate design. And one of the things that we discovered was that that's a pretty bad way to lay it out, because it means that every region has multiple what are called child regions. And it became clear to us through some very wise counseling that we'd be a lot better off if no region had any more than 2 bordering regions. So that meant the region in the middle had to go. Now that was our arrival region, and we had called it rather unimaginatively Fairelands Central, Fantasy Fair Central, actually, because it was right in the middle there. We knew we had to get that arrival region out of the middle and create essentially a ring that was hollow in the center, the void sea in the middle of the estate. So then the question is, well, if it's not in the middle of the estate, then it can't be called Fairelands Central exactly. So what do we call it? And the first piece of this Mythos puzzle was when, after kicking names around for 45 minutes to an hour, Elizabeth said, Junction. And I get choked up. I get chills still to this day, because as soon as she said the word, it was just like, yes, that's exactly what it is. That word has not only, a lot of resonance as a hub, a transportation hub. It also is what in electrical schematics, that's where all the various lines of power intersect. It's where power is then distributed out to a larger system. The junction is where all the threads of power come together and then radiate out. So as soon as we knew that was the name, junction was the name, then the question became, well, junction what? And where does this junction lead to? What do we call this estate? Because we were saying, well, it's Fantasy Fair, but in a sense, Fantasy Fair, even just using that word fantasy, immediately removes us from the immersive role play aspect of all of this. So that left us with the word fair. And from there, very quickly, our arrival region came to be known as Fairelands Junction. That was the birth of the Mythos. Those two things were where it all began. The question is then, well, we know we're going to change Fairland regions every single year, different builders, different themes. But this region called Junction, it's going to keep coming back year after year after year. Well, why is that? Why does it keep coming back? And the effect of that was to then lead to the idea that Junction herself is not just a place. Junction is a consciousness. There's an intelligence at work there. It's Junction it depends on how you want to look at it. Junction is either drawing worlds from elsewhere in the great, vast pantheon of fantastical, magical realms, and drawing those together so that for a time they border one another, bending space and time to make that bordering happen. You could also look at it as if it's Junction who is whispering into the dreams of the world builders and inspiring them about what they want to build in the coming year. So I think that is that's really interesting that Junction is doing both of those things for us at the same time. And it kind of just depends on how you want to view that, how you want to interpret that image for yourself. So Junction is both of those things.
So Zander,
yep.
Would it be fair to say, given the way you're describing this, that although Junction and these fundamental understandings came out in conversation, that it was less that you were inventing them and more that you were discovering them?
That's absolutely what it was. And I have said from the beginning, I don't bristle at being called the founder of Fantasy Fair, but I would bristle at being called the founder of the Fairlands, because that's not what happened. I have said for years now that all of us who were there in those early years and who are still working on it today have always felt that we just sort of were the first ones who tumbled down the rabbit hole and discovered this thing. And what that thing is continues to grow and evolve and expand because people keep coming and they keep adding their part to that story. So yes, this is not an invention so much as it is a discovery. And even at that level, it's a collective discovery. We all learn new things about the mythos every single year. We unearth new characters, new stories. And there's not a soul, as I look on the list of people here. I mean, I don't see a single name here in this room with us tonight who has not lent some extraordinarily important component to what the story of the Fairlands is all about. We're all explorers, Panza, absolutely right. And what we get to do is come here and interact with this world, but more importantly, with one another. Alia Baroque one time said to me, Fairlands are not made of mesh or sculpts or prims or scripts or textures. He said, Fairlands are made of Fairlanders. And, you know, that's just as well as it could possibly be said.
So we are in a year when a big leap has been taken, or a big discovery was made, or a big extension has occurred. And that, I believe, started last year towards the end of the fair and became the seed of the quest for this year.
Yeah. This is a story that tells you everything about how this process works.
And this is where Ashlyn comes in.
Absolutely.
So could you say something, Ash, or like, and I only say that just because if we talked about everything, if we had all of it, we'd be here for the next week.
That's
So
true.
could you say something about how this year's quest came to be from seeds that emerged last year and of course from many years before that?
Yes, well, just starting, thank you very much for that lovely introduction, by the way. And I don't bristle, but I sort of, at being called the Bard Queen, I have the honor of writing and voicing the Bard Queen, but I really can't say that I am. She's just way beyond me. But in any case, what happened was that last year, Shahara, who's the dragon guardian of the Fairlands, had 4 babies. A lovely thing. And they were named by 4 Fairlanders. And Zander actually asked me to make little statuettes for those Fairlanders who named them, and so I did that. And in the process of that, I thought, well, we've got 4 new characters here. And Sonia Martinek had devised, sketched out personalities for each of them, so they came ready-made with a little personality. And so I was able to take that and spin a story from it, which was one of the easiest ones I've ever done, I have to say. And I was really pleased with this year's story, especially because it had threads from so many people in it. I really enjoy doing that. When I um, sit down to write a quiddle, I don't sit down to write it until a whole lot of percolation has gone on and a lot of consulting with people. But um, this year we had a lot of story contributions from Sonia and from Elizabeth Tinsley, who thought about she wanted to do the region and thought about it so deeply that she amplified the story so much. A lot of its richness is due to Elizabeth. And also Tara Volatant, our programmer, who is not only great at what he does technically, he's also really excellent at game design, and I rely on him a lot for that. And Judy Newell, who's new to our team this year, also had some wonderful ideas. So I really enjoy incorporating everyone's ideas as much as I can into a story. But anyway, that's how we got baby dragonettes this year.
And who can resist baby dragons?
Exactly. As someone very smart said.
So for those who maybe didn't get the implication of my introduction earlier, Ash is the head of the team who creates the quest each year. And of course, she's not the only one on that team, but she is the director of the quest. So I'm going to ask you, Ash, a slightly different kind of question, because this conversation takes us a little bit behind the scenes as well as into the story. What's that like?
Oh, Well, from my perspective, it can be months of, like I said, percolation. I really try and find, well, the germ of an idea, I suppose. And of course, it has to do a number of concrete things. It has to be able to encourage Fairlanders to explore the entire estate in part one. That's a concrete goal that we have. And then, of course, have to have an end to the story and a reason for the story. And um, so really what I do, I suppose, is just think about it, in the front of my mind or the back of my mind for a number of months, and then I'll start once I feel I have a handle on it strong enough. I usually start with talking to Tara and see what he wants to bring to it. He always has lots of ideas. We can do this, we can do this, and um, so I usually start with Tara, and then when I'll start writing at that point. The ultimate goal is to have a treatment. Usually, I'll start with a background paragraph, the basis of the story, and share that around and see what people think and what they feel can be added to it. And the treatment, of course, will be like it would be for a film, a description of the entire story, beginning to end, including the mechanics and all of that kind of thing. As complete as I make it, I don't write a script per se for the game because uh, that really is not necessary, I think, in this case. But I do, of course, write scripts for the videos that are included, but and all the dialogue. But I don't sort of sequence it like a film script would be.
So this year's quest is clearly going to become part of a whole collection of stories since there are 4 baby dragons.
Yes.
But this story also has, I'm setting this up as a question, and I want to just say I am not in any way criticizing any past quest because they've all been wonderful. But this year's felt, I think, that it had a depth to it, a heart to it that really touched a lot of people. And so, what I'd like to ask you, Ash, is as you were developing the elements that became this particular quest, what for you were the key plot elements, perhaps, or concepts or emotions that wove themselves together to create the deep, heartfelt story that unfolded in this year's quest?
Wow. I can tell you where I started, and that was with magic. There are 4 precepts in magical practice. Uh, I may not get them in proper order: to dare, to know, to will, to keep silent. And the personality sketches that Sonia devised for the 4 dragonettes really lent themselves to that. So that's what I was working with initially, exploring those themes. I'm not sure that really answers your question. To me, where the heart wasn't really in something that I did. And I again attribute this to Elizabeth, and I think also to Judy Newell. And that is the concept that Fairlanders directly manifest magic in this process. Their steps on the path, on the labyrinth, which was Elizabeth's idea, a labyrinth hidden in plain sight, a labyrinth composed of the actual pathways of the region of that realm. But once entered at its entrance, which is a sacred place, then one would be on the path to the mystic heart. And the steps on the path to the mystic heart generate magic if the path is walked with good intent. Um, And that is magic that the dragonettes would be able to use to heal the realm. So I pretty much put a lot of that at Elizabeth's door. I mean, some of my stuff in it too, I think, but that particular concept of the labyrinth was Elizabeth's, and I think it was just genius. She, like I said, she did so much thought uh, in this region. I think she knows every blade of grass in it, and everything is there for a reason. And it really was wonderful being able to work with her in that way.
I think how it came out for me, and this is reflected in exactly what you just said, but perhaps adds to it, is two ideas. One is that in the story of the people who had lived in Nadia, that part of what had sustained the land and part of what would be needed to bring the land back to life was a reflection of their collective memories, which was reflected in the current land by the mementos, the trinkets, but the idea that although the Nadians had to leave, that they would not forget. And then that was echoed and amplified by what you just said, Ash, that it was the steps of the Fairlanders themselves that somehow, and correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but somehow reconnected to the collective memories of the Nadians that had lived there before. So there's this sense of past being essential to what needed to be done in the present, and the actions of those in the present then reactivating those past memories that were held in the land. Is that
Yes,
fair? Yeah.
yes, that is right. Um, Hold on one second. I've got something running here.
Okay.
Oh my goodness.
So how about if for a moment I turn this back to you, Zander? Because part of the
Please do. I'm
story.
sorry, I have a voice in my ear and I'm not sure where it's coming from, so I need to find
Oh,
it and stop it.
okay.
Something's running on my machine.
Okay. Um, I was just about to turn this back to you anyway, Zander, but this is the opportune time, right?
Happy to
Part
do it.
of the story that led up to the baby dragons is the story of Shahara. And I wanted to invite you to remind us and share with those who might not know who Shahara is and why she plays such a central role in this year's story, not only as the mom, but like who she is and why she's important.
Well, and this is where you really, I think, begin to get a sense of how this is all an extraordinary collaboration, because there's just a lot of people who have gotten us to the point where we were 11 years ago to where we are with the quest this year. So let's see, so 11 years ago, we launched Fantasy Fair Radio. I've been wanting to do it from the beginning. I just didn't have the time or the resources really to make it happen. Finally, 11 years ago, okay, now we can do this. So we created Fantasy Fair Radio. One of our main builders at that time was an extraordinary builder named Ren Verwood. I went to Ren and I said, we really want to do this, and I'd really like to have some kind of sailing vessel, sea vessel, but my idea is that it would be a dragon-powered airship. So that was the birth of the Fairchild, and Ren built the Fairchild, built the dragon for it, and we're standing there looking at the finished product, and she said, "What do you want to call the boat?" And I said, "I think I like the idea of the Fairchild." She said, "I like that." I said, "What do you want to call the dragon?" And she paused for a moment and said, "Shahara." Well, I love that. That's great. Let's do that. So bam, that's where that all started. Now, and that was the story, really. That's really mostly what we had for a long time thereafter. And then I guess it was like 2 or 3 years ago, I'm blanking now. We finally realized that so many people were just loving coming to those parties on the Fairchild that we really had gotten where we outgrew it. Rin was no longer active in Second Life, but Ketsui Naidu had come on the scene, and we knew we were looking for somebody to give us a bigger, it's like the line from Jaws, but we needed a bigger boat. In conversation with Ketsui as an incoming first-time fair merchant, in conversation with Elizabeth, Ketsui used the word airship, and Elizabeth went, aha. And so that's how Ketsui Naidu was asked to become the shipwright for our new, more expanded Fairchild 2. And we wanted to give Ketsui as much latitude creatively as we possibly could. So we said, please don't feel like you're tied to anything that this has been. You should let your imagination run wild and take it where you will. So we have these beautiful sails. I love the sails on the new Fairchild, and it has this lovely supersized deck that really just is great for accommodating all the people who'd like to go to one of these parties.
Really
But
is
we also still wanted to make sure Shahara was there. She'd become such an iconic part of the fair for so many people. And I had folks that year who were messaging me saying, I'm excited to see the new Fairchild, but please tell me Shahara is going to be around. Absolutely. We're going to have Shahara there. So Shahara is now behind the ship. She's semi-retired. I always joked that, Shahara kept us both in the air and on the air on Fantasy Fair Radio. But she was sitting back there looking over the back of the boat, enjoying actually getting to go to one of the parties for the first time ever. And one night I'm looking over there at her and just smiling at my old friend. And I noticed that there was this space, this gap between her front legs. Her front armed paws were crossed in front of her as she sat. And just in that space in my mind, I just suddenly saw eggs in my head. There were eggs there. And so I tapped Ketsui on the shoulder. I said, I don't want to add to your plate, but you think you could maybe make me 4 dragon eggs that we could stick in there between Shahara's front paws? Well, it's like 5 minutes later. Ketsui's like, here's your eggs, bam. So, and they were just wonderful. So that was the story a few years back. And then last year, we had Shahara, and she was kind of lounging by a nice little pond just down at the bottom of the steps where you went up to the Fairchild. And so we took our little mini dragonettes that we made, and we had them kind of bathing in various states of submersion into that pond there. And so now there's Shahara, and there's her 4 hatchlings. And that was about all there was to that until Sonia Marmarek came along and said, why don't we have a silent auction item that will auction off the right to name the 4 dragonettes, the 4 hatchlings, which was just absolutely brilliant. And Sonia had developed an entire mythos around that, the naming rights. And it's tradition to give the newborn dragons, gold, so they begin to build their hoard. But that these dragons had decided that they wanted their birthday gift of the coin to go to supporting the battle against the Unweaver. And so we had 4 Fairlanders who each won the silent auction right to name one of those 4 dragons, and we ended up with Shahara. And so it's help me, Ash. It's Gaia,
Telenor, Saraminka, and Ardani.
Those were the 4 names that came away from the silent auction, and now we have Shahara with a named group of 4 offspring, and then we come into the story of the quest this year, where now it's their first birthday, and they are leading the charge in trying to restore the mystic heart of Nova Nadia. And so you think about just all those people who have, stepped up at a moment and had either a moment of flash of inspiration or a moment of generosity, all of it kind of blending and combining to become something that now is part of the mythos of the Fairlands forevermore.
Many hands. Yeah.
Indeed.
I'd like to circle back to Aoife's question, if I may, now that I've solved my technical problem,
Yay.
because it was such a lovely question. The mystic heart that Zander just referenced, I believe, it's composed of the hearts of all Nadians, all the ones who used to live there. Just their spirit joined and created their hearts, created the mystic heart. And the path to reach the heart is made of their footsteps as they walk around their land, as they tend their land. Um, that formed the way to reach the heart. So yes, it absolutely did depend on what used to be and what is now and what could be done now, and Fairlanders' connections uh, to to the Nadians who were forced to leave. And it was they, Fairlanders, who have and still are creating magic that is restoring that realm. There are more lights on the lake now, and those represent all of the magic that the Fairlanders have generated through their steps on the path.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask a related question. So forgive me if this is too repetitious, but I'm not sure that everyone will know that the lake itself is shaped like a heart.
Yes, and so is the path. And that was, again, Elizabeth's doing. It was just such a lovely concept. The path is four concentric heart shapes surrounding the heart-shaped lake.
Another contribution of Elizabeth to that is she brought Shahara into it as well, narratively, and decided that Shahara had been active toward the end of that war with the Unweavers' forces and had been delivering supplies and medical aid to the Nadians, and then was a major part of the airlift operation to help them get away at the end as well. And that's why there's an ice sculpture, dragon ice sculpture there on Nova Nadia.
Mhm, mhm.
That's a testament that the Nadians wanted to acknowledge Shahara's vital role in helping them in their escape.
I just want to say here too, we're talking about Nadians. There is a real world connection to this that some people may know, some may not. Nadia is the Ukrainian word for hope. Nova Nadia, of course, would then mean real hope, or excuse me, new hope. So Fairlanders are bringing new hope to this realm. And that is indeed a little tip of the hat to what's going on in the mundane world.
Yes. So often about this time in our conversation, we ask for questions from the audience based on what they've heard and what else they would like to hear about. But before I do that, I would like to ask each of you if there's anything that you would like to add or amplify, or perhaps something completely new that you'd like to bring into the conversation. So either one of you can go first, but anything you want to
Well,
amplify or add, or a new topic you want to bring in.
I think we should just make a quick point that the Bard Queen is a very important. She was another of the first threads that Elizabeth and I worked on weaving into a Mythos tapestry. And from the beginning, the idea there was that Junction can't speak to us in a language that we're going to understand. So she needs an interpreter. She needs someone who can help to bridge the gap between what she's trying to do and our understanding of those goals. And that's where the idea of the Bardic Order and then the Bard Queen herself ultimately came from. So it's been wonderful to have Ash as the voice, I think of it as puppeteering, honestly, both the puppeteer and the voice and the spirit of the Bard Queen. So she plays a huge, huge role as well. And then at some point, we'll probably want to touch on the Unweaver as well, but let's leave him out of it for now. We have more pleasant things to talk about in the meantime.
Yeah, the Bard Queen is a character that I've really wanted to bring to the fore. When I first started doing quests, um, she had made appearances from time to time in a quest or two, but I didn't feel had a role. And Zander had written this beautiful story that he just explained the germ of. It's essentially her origin story, which is a sad story. I mean, it's not altogether cheerful, but I really wanted to tell it. We did that in 2018 in the quest called The House of Garland, and it's still one of my favorite ones, just because that story is so rich. But it does explain who the Bard Queen is, who her family is, why she is the way she is, and that all goes back to her father, Francis Garland. And I won't
Links,
go into the whole story right now. It would take
Links
too long.
asked a really good question about Junction. We could come to that, but I'd like to actually give Sage, I don't know if you use Mike. I'm sorry, I'm not going to put you on the spot here, but maybe you could just respond in text, if nothing else, to Zri's wonderful question. What's the inspiration for this year's Junction design? It blends so well with Nova Nadia. And so was that inspired by the quest as well? I would like to let Sage Lotus, who's here with us in the house, have a chance to speak to that. If you could do so in voice, Sage, that's awesome. And if not, then just maybe take a moment and sketch out a response in text for us on that one. That's a great question. Strifeclaw would be the one to answer it. Don't want to put Sage on the spot. Well, Junction changes every year. Sage brings us a different interpretation of Junction every single time. So, I mean, a lot of things I think go into what Sage is doing each year when she brings us a new Junction. Yeah, I think maybe there was a sense that there were going to be a run of wintry regions, and but there's also something that just happens, and Elizabeth and I notice it every single year without really a whole lot of coordination. The world builders all tap into some kind of collective consciousness thing, and they don't all build the same things, but you can find a lot of really interesting common threads that turn up in region after region over the course of a fair. Some theme or some symbol or something will start emerging. So this year, I think there may have been something going on there in people's minds that just made it feel like winter was a thing that needed to be represented here. We haven't had too many snowy, wintry regions in the past, and it's one of Elizabeth's favorite things to see and to do in Second Life is create wintry worlds. So yeah, and I think we're all excited by some of the advances that we know are coming soon to the grid. And my understanding, limited as it is that some of those may really raise the value of what we can do with things like reflections in ice and that sort of thing. So I think that what the future holds for that is really, really intriguing and interesting. Well, fair enough. Sage is concerned that if she answers, she'll ruin the mystique, and I don't fault anyone for that at all. So yeah, I think a lot of these incredible artists who are here, they speak through their work, and you go and you spend time and you fall in love with these worlds, and you're connecting, you're communing with each of these artists when you do that. Havett and Lilia, I always think that whatever they do for the dance and performance region, I just feel like I get to wander around in their dreams. It's the surrealism and the whimsy of that world they always create every year. Again, it's different, but I always know this is a Havett and Lilia region. I know this is a Sage Lotus build. They all have such a unique creative point of view that they bring to the task of world building for us every year. And Sage, in many ways, has one of the toughest jobs because we give her a lot of things on the checklist that Junction needs to do and be. The portals alone are an enormous amount of work to produce. So the fact that she's been able to check all those boxes off, the memorial candle array, the hall of portals, I love the worldlings. We could do a whole 2 hours on what's awesome about the worldlings. But Sage finds a way every year to give us those things that Junction needs to be, but then also, brings her own creative spirit to the task of giving us a brand new Junction every year. And for the sake of the folks who can't see the text that Sage has just shared, she says, I'd love to tell you that I'm really organized and have all this planned. Elizabeth has been pushing me to do a winter build for quite some time. but I did not want to do it when someone else had done one. So I had to tell Elizabeth very, very early on this past year that this year I would do ice. So there you go. That's a back and forth, a dialogue that happens between Sage and Elizabeth. They've been working together creatively for a very long time. And I agree with Sage here. She's just said it's hard to do ice in a way that doesn't feel like, oh, that's just normal winter. And I think Junction does an outstanding job this year of evoking winter, but doing so in a way that is really remarkable and surprising.
Mao, I'm going to give a short answer to that question and then redirect to something Zander said and then ask Zander and Ash to give you a longer answer to your question, which is a little convoluted, but I think you'll see why. The question you asked, Mao, where is the catch-up material for those folks who are just dipping their toes into the fair, is one of the reasons that Fairelands Media was created. How do we collect and share this lore? So that's my short answer. But what I'm going to redirect to is Zander actually introduced the name of our least favorite character and said that we needed to talk about this least favorite character before our session ended. So I don't like, and I don't think we ever have, ended a session talking about the Unweaver. So what I would suggest, since we are getting close to the top of the next hour, what I would suggest is, Zander, I'm going to ask you to say something about the Unweaver, and Ash, of course, you can as well. But then I am going to invite the two of you to offer a broader answer to the question that Mao asked, which I love, which is, where's the material for the folks who don't know anything about this? And, you know, how can we chronicle that for the future? So Unweaver first, chronicle for the future second.
As it should be. I lost my dad to cancer in 2008, and the doctor who was caring for him towards the end of the days was trying to answer a question that I asked, which is, what the hell is cancer? And he said, it's life mutates, things, cells change. Oftentimes those changes are wonderful and we evolve. Oftentimes they are meaningless. Too often they become malignant, and that's cancer. And he said, the web of life, this is a quote, I'll remember to the day I die. He said, the web of life is loosely woven. Cancer pulls those delicate threads apart. And I just was struck by that poetic, philosophical nature of his response. That is the Unweaver. It isn't just a symbol for cancer. It's really an embodiment of two things. One is the force of entropy, and the tendency that complex systems have to move from states of order to states of chaos over the long haul. But as Aoife Lorefield once pointed out to me, the Unweaver is also just kind of unchecked growth. It's just growth that's just growing and growing and growing. And it doesn't matter that the growth is negative and destructive. When you have unchecked growth, things get lost, things get damaged. And that's really what the Unweaver is there to be. You will notice that the Unweaver doesn't speak. He's not personified. That is simply because you can't see cancer. You can't talk to it. You can't talk to entropy. And you can't talk to whatever that thing is that leads to destructive, unchecked growth. So, yeah, that's what the figure of the Unweaver is there to be, a counterpoint to what Junction represents, really. It's Junction on one side and the Unweaver on the other side, and the Bard Queen in the middle, acting as an advocate for us, all of us. She is very human. I mean, she's got the magic fae thing going on, obviously, but ultimately she's meant to be the human part that we can identify with and connect with. But on the extremes are these disembodied, unpersonified forces of creativity and destruction. And we could do the mists as well in that, because that's a separate thing entirely. But there is the short answer for the Unweaver.
Ash, is there anything you'd like to add on this particular topic?
Just to essentially amplify what Zander said, I've always considered the Unweaver as chaos and caprice, and um, Junction as peace and order, as expressed through the Bard Queen. Junction can't speak, of course. Junction, uh, for a long time, wasn't understood. But until Francis Garland arrived and was able to, through her stories that he pursued and collected, through stories he came to understand Junction and was able to divine what she meant. And that was passed to her daughter, to his daughter, excuse me, the Bard Queen, Maya Evangeline's her name. So we do have these two polar opposites, and they do exist in the spirit world, and the Bard Queen is the mediator between the two of them.
And how Junction did manage to speak at the Children of Stories finale last weekend is an important point to be made. But I think it's probably one that we all need to just sort of sit with for a time and really consider that. That did happen. We heard a voice, and it was Junction's own. So how that happened, I think Fairland mages and scholars are going to be asking that question for some time to come. And I'm certain that over time, we as a community will come to understand what made the difference in that moment. I give credit to the Children of Stories, because if anybody embodies what Junction is all about, it's them. So I think it had a lot to do with just the fact of who they are and what they bring to this community every single year.
She had her reason.
She did.
So Mao's question was asking essentially how we chronicle for the future, which I'm going to reframe slightly and note that the chronicle part is important and the future part is important. So what I'd like to do as a way to bring some of these threads together in this conversation, not in any final way, but in this conversation, for each of you, something about the something about the idea of chronicling and something about the idea of the future.
Ash, why don't you
You
jump
first,
on in?
Zander.
Oh, no.
Well, chronicling is a lot easier at the moment than the future. There are I have materials stuffed in folders in all kinds of places across 3 platforms, I think. And what I really am starting to do is gather all of those. And a lot of the story of the quest typically is told in videos, because it's where you can do that kind of exposition, and then you set up a situation and tell people go and do. But there are still some things missing, even if I gathered all of those, which I will do, of course. But so then it would need to be written down, essentially what the rest of the story is, and how Fairlanders were able to contribute to the end goal of that. As for the future, well, I hope that the past will be a springboard for the future, and I'm sure that it will. Everyone sitting here is part of that future, and we rely on your energy and your thoughts and your ideas, and they will carry us forward along with Junction, who always provides.
Absolutely right. Let's think of these in two. The words are already there. We'll just make use of them. The question is, what are the chronicles, and then what are the prophecies, past and the future? So one of the main ways that we're going to be able to chronicle what has come before, thanks to the fact that Ash has kept such extraordinarily detailed records of everything that has been done on these quest storylines, Safia Wittershins was the initial director of the quest and carried that until LitFest grew into such a large thing that she needed to be able to focus on that important aspect of the fair. That's when Ash stepped up and said, I can take this part on. And all of those years of stories, we do have all of the material, most of the material, I would think, from all the years that we have had a Fairelands quest. Ultimately, all of that is going to find a home, and this is where the prophecy now part comes into it. That is, as Aoife said, exactly and precisely what Fairelands Media is going to do. It will ultimately be a repository for the mythos of the Fairelands, a place where what has come before can be preserved and shared with a larger audience in a form that hopefully will enable people who haven't got a clue about any of this, don't even know what Second Life is. This is a great story. You are a great story. And you are such a great story that the world at large deserves to know that story. And it's going to be our job as the Bards of Fairelands Media to make sure that your story is known. I believe there's a lot of support for what we're trying to do here, build a world without cancer. I believe there is a lot of support out there, and we don't need to keep asking more and more and more of the people who are here. We need to be going out and knocking on some doors out in the physical world and saying, just so you know, there are 1,100 people working to make this thing happen, and 30,000 visitors showing up to make their generosity a part of the solution to this problem. And there's a place for you in this too. You don't even have to have an account. You don't need to make an avatar. Here's what we're doing, and here's a way that you can make a donation. And that money too will then all go into the work that is done by the Global Initiatives Department at the American Cancer Society. So that's really a big, big part of what Fairelands Media's goals are over the long haul. Preserve what has come before and create a space for us to reach out to a new, broader global community and say, sorry, and say, we have everything we need to end the scourge of cancer once and for all. It's just a matter of time, and money is, I love a problem that you can solve by throwing money at it. How easy is that? With enough money, you think about what's happened to cancer mortality rates since Relay for Life was founded now almost 40 years ago by Dr. Gordy Klatt. Guy had an idea. Man had an idea. I'm gonna walk around a track. I'm gonna walk around a track so people pay attention and I can alert them to the need for community support for what the American Cancer Society is doing. That idea has led to billions of dollars pouring in from all over the world. Relay for Life, a simple idea that has literally changed the world. And in the years since he did that, in the years since Relay for Life became a thing, cancer mortality rates have decreased by 30%. Types of cancer that were a death sentence 40 years ago, people are living, even the ones that aren't curable, people are living with them, not dying from them. And we lose way too many people. We still lose way too many people. But that's what we're here to do. We're here to make sure that what his idea set in motion continues forward. And if anybody can do that, it is the creative geniuses and the beautiful souls that are present in this room tonight. You are the cure. You are how we get there. The cure is not a thing. The cure is a process. And you are an engine that is driving that process forward. And one of these days, we're going to get there. I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime. I don't know. But it's okay. I don't need to know. I know we're going to get there. I know we're going to get there. And when we do, whoever still is, attached to the mortal coil in this world will be able to look back and say, I helped make that happen.
Fairelanders did that.
How can you not want to be a part of that story?
Ash, thank you so much for being part of the Mythos conversation this year. I am confident that you're now part of this going forward.
I think so. You're gonna have to pry me out of here. Thank
Never
you.
accept a
No,
TP.
I don't mean the fair or the story. I mean this event. Like,
Oh.
you're gonna be back here next year on stage,
Okay.
as part of this conversation, because it is such a rich conversation that we have each year, and is in itself part of both the Chronicle and the future. So thank you so much for joining this conversation, this event this year. And Zander, of course, thank you to you as well. And thanks to each and every one of you who are here attending this event, and for everything each of you does to make the fair what it is, and to become part of the story of the fair, and also the wider story of the movement toward a world without cancer. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Eve.